my friends are synths.
In this video, I'm going to show you another interesting Norns script. For those of you not familiar with Norns, that's the wee standalone computer here. Technically, this is a Norns Shield, which is a DIY version of Norns, but we're not going to get into that. Basically, it's a standalone computer that lets you run all these really interesting scripts that the Monome community have come up with, whether they're synthesizers, sequencers, or whatever else. And today, I'm going to be looking at Boingg. This is one of my all-time favourite Monome scripts, and I'm really happy to see that it's on Norns. The concept of it basically is you get a whole bunch of bouncing balls that represent sounds, and whenever they hit the bottom of the grid, they produce a sound. In this case, I'm not using the inbuilt sounds from the Norns, although it does have a synth engine in there you can use with this. I have it hooked up via USB MIDI to my Monome Fes, which is a 6-voice polyphonic synth, and I think it sounds better than the Norns synth in there. So that's how that's working. Now, normally you'll see people using Norns with a Monome Grid. That's the kind of most beautiful way, I guess, to use it, and it's specifically designed for Monome grids and ARC controllers and things. But you can use alternative grids. For example, here I am using this Linnstrument. The reason I'm using the Linnstrument is because it has 1 to 8 pads, so I'm able to make full use of all of the steps on here. You can use Launchpad and stuff, but Launchpads are 64 steps or 64 pads, so you don't quite get the full kind of, power of this thing. Now, I'm just going to show you essentially how this operates and how it might sound. So the very basic premise is we hit one pad, and you'll see whenever this bouncing ball touches the bottom, it plays a note. Now we can select the note and trigger them without a grid, so you don't need a grid to do this. You can select it using this encoder here and then press a button and then press that to stop it. However, the grid is much more fun because you then get this, kind of hands-on tactile feel. So if we start playing about, you can see you can stop it by hitting the bottom row. Now, some other cool things you can do with this is if you go into the settings for it, you can transpose everything. And this is a master transpose or a global transpose, so it affects all of the notes. And it goes up fairly ludicrously high, also very low. Now the other thing you can do in the settings is change the probability, so it's not always going to trigger a note when they hit the bottom. So if we adjust this down, you can see that it's not always triggering a note now when the balls hit the bottom. And this is particularly useful when you've got lots and lots of things going on because it makes it a bit less busy. Now that's all well and good, but it sounded a wee bit of a cacophony of noise there, right? So if I put probability back up to 100%, if we go into here, we're just getting kind of the notes that they've told us are within this scale, right? So how do you change the actual note of each step? Well, in order to do that, we have to use the control on Norns here, but let's say this one. Using this one, we can shift. You can see this now gives us a wee bit more control in terms of how musical this can be. So let's try. And when you start to bring in effects and stuff like this, or perhaps, you know, change the probability, bring the tempo down quite a lot, maybe bring up the reverb on this. You can see how you can quickly start to get some really beautiful kind of textural, melodical things that you're not having to think too much about in terms of sequencing or deliberately laying out notes. And so that's kind of it. If you were using the internal synthesis rather than an external synthesizer, there are a whole bunch of options in here in terms of legato, so you can change all of that kind of stuff, change the shape and timbre and the, you know, attack, all the envelope settings to your heart's content. However, that's really the basics of it and how it works. And I really enjoy this kind of approach to doing stuff. If you're looking for something a wee bit more ambient, a wee bit more generative, although I can't really say that word, probably too many T's. But that's one of the other scripts you can find using Norns. And yes.